Well, let's go now to the bailout announced today by the federal New South Wales government. And it's yet another bailout in a long line of bailouts for large-scale manufacturing in Australia. Have a look at the screen. The bailouts total now $7.7 billion. That's your money that we're wasting because Labor is persisting with a whole lot of green policies designed to drive these manufacturers broke and send them offshore. Joining us now, News 24's business editor Ross Greenwood, who I suspect is as cranky as I am about this colossal waste of money. It's all borrowed money too, I might add. We're borrowing money left, right and centre in this country, but that's $2 million per job, Ross.
It's a lot of money per job, there's no doubt. But here's the second and important part about this. Rio Tinto is a company that is worth, on our stock market, $237 billion. And yet it's gone to the government not once, but twice to get bailed out from these aluminium smelters. One you saw there is quite clearly Tomago, which is the biggest electricity user in New South Wales. It uses up to 12% of the total electricity that's generated in New South Wales. The other one is the Bowen smelter, and Rio Tinto owns 73% of that. So you might ask, why is it that the government would bail out one of the wealthiest mining companies in the world? Well, the reason is because these companies have threatened to close down these smelters and move elsewhere. Now, aluminium, I've got to tell you, is what people sometimes call solid electricity. And so the reason why these smelters are uneconomic, every one of those on the screen there, Near Star, which is Port Pirie in Tasmania, Mount Isa, of course, copper, Whyalla Steelworks is a basket case and arguably could and should have been closed. But the reality is, in the aluminium smelters in particular, they need their core ingredient, which makes up about 30 to 40% of their cost, is electricity. And the reason why they were started here in Australia in the first place is because we had plentiful and cheap electricity. And so as a result of this, as soon as electricity prices have started to rise, as we've had the rollout of renewables, every one of these managers of these aluminium smelters has screamed at government for a decade and basically said, hey, listen, you've got to find a way to give us cheap, reliable, baseload power, because this intermittent power, which is coming from the renewables, is not good enough to be able to run these smelters. And so their costs of electricity have risen on average by around 50% in the past 10 years, which makes these smelters uneconomic, except for the case when government, state and federal, have to effectively bail them out. It's not about the 1,000 jobs. It's just about the fact that these smelters and the money from Rio Tinto and other giant miners will pick itself up and go somewhere else in the world. And that is not good for Australia at all.
And what I want people to understand too with these heavy industries in Australia, the risk they leave is the national security risk should they go, right? So a lot of these processes, as it was explained to me in government in policy sense, a military grade steel is different than a lot of the steel that we might import from places like Indonesia and in part in China. So we want that sovereign manufacturing capability of military grade steel onshore. We need to keep these products here like smelters as well, all the mining that we possibly can. The world is an uncertain place. So yes, there's a balance sheet risk, absolutely, Ross, but there's a national security risk if they leave. Hence, there is a national security argument, and this would have been discussed around the cabinet table, believe me, as to why the $2.5 billion today should be paid. But what angers me, and I think angers every Australian watching this tonight, is that the arsonist is there for the announcement. I mean, the reason we're in this mess is Chris Bowen. The arsonist is there as the fire brigade's trying to put out the fire.
Oh, well, that staggered me, I've got to say. So to have seen the Industry Minister, Tim Ayres, there today, absolutely 100%. To have seen Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier, who was a reluctant participant in this, I'll say, because remember at the very beginning, this was a commitment by the Prime Minister, went to those workers, 1,000 workers, and said, I've got your back. I will actually make certain that this does not collapse. And so as a result, Chris Minns said, well, you made the announcement, you put most of the money in. And of course, the Fed said, well, no. And so there's been friction between the New South Wales government and the federal government over who should pay for the bailout of Tomago. Now, as it turns out, they've had to do separate deals, and I think there might be announcements about GST redistribution coming in the next little while. I'll be interested to watch that, because that might be the quid pro quo where New South Wales gets something back, particularly from Western Australia. But, the point is to see Chris Bowen standing there. Well, this was really all about the actual philosophical commitment to renewable energy that really caused these industries to become uneconomic in Australia. And this is not what we want in Australia. We want dynamic, vibrant, competitive, businesses here in Australia that stand on their own 2 feet, that don't need government bailouts. That's what this country needs, not government simply turning up the whole time with a spare $1 billion of your taxpayer dollars to simply
Quick favour. If you are the kind of person who loves Australia and wants to stay ahead of what is really happening in our country's politics, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It helps us keep this channel going. Over 90% of viewers have not yet, and it would mean the world to us if you did. Thank you. Now, back to the show. $2 million. That is how much of your money it now costs to save a single job at a smelter that was supposed to stand on its own 2 feet. And while the headlines say the government just rode in like a knight in shining armour to rescue the workers of the Hunter, the real story is far uglier, because the people writing the $2.5 billion cheque are the very same people who lit the fire in the first place. Let us set the scene, because it matters. Aluminium is not really a metal business, it's an electricity business. They call the stuff solid electricity, and for good reason. Power makes up 30 to 40% of every single tonne. Australia built these smelters here for one reason and one reason only. We had cheap, reliable power coming out of the walls. It was our superpower. Then, over the last decade, electricity prices climbed 50%. The cheap baseload power got switched off, and suddenly a company like Rio Tinto, a $237 billion giant, one of the richest companies on the planet, found it cheaper to threaten to pack up and leave than to pay the bill.
And here is the part that should make your blood boil. They have done this before. This is the second time Rio Tinto has put its hand out for a bailout while sitting on a fortune most countries could only dream of. It is the corporate equivalent of a bloke in a brand new Mercedes pulling up to the Centrelink window and asking for rent assistance. Now, real quick, if you are enjoying this, do not forget to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps us bring you these stories. But let us be fair, because this is not just about a greedy corporation. It's about the $7.7 billion Canberra has now tipped into big manufacturing and the grim maths behind it. 1,000 jobs at Tomago, $2 million a pop. Whyalla is on life support, Mount Isa, Port Pirie, Bowen. The list of heavy industry that cannot survive without a drip feed from the taxpayer is getting longer every single year. So here's the question nobody in Canberra wants to answer. If the green transition is meant to make Australia stronger, why is every major industrial asset in the country now begging to be saved from it? That's the part they cannot spin. Chris Bowen and his crew spent years cheering on the renewables rollout, and now they're being asked to be the fire brigade for the industries their own policies burned down. The arsonist turning up with a hose. Chris Minns knew it too. That's why New South Wales dragged its feet and demanded the federal government pick up the bill. When the states start fighting over who pays, you know the plan is not working. And the justification for all of it, national security, sovereign capability, which sounds noble until you realise they cannot actually define what it means. So let's be honest, bailing out a $200 billion company is not a strategy, it's a symptom. And until someone builds some actual cheap, reliable power,